Welcome to our deep dive today. We're going to be really taking apart and looking at Seth Godin's Purple Cow.
Oh, yeah.
This book, it's all about standing out right
Yeah.
in a world that's just
Right.
absolutely packed full of choices. And we're going to be kind of like pulling out those insights
Yeah.
that we think are most important for you.
Yeah, this book really shook things up when it came out. Godin, he basically declared, traditional marketing dead
Oh, yeah.
and said the old way of doing things, it just doesn't work anymore.
Yeah. I remember thinking, wow, he's not pulling any punches.
Yeah.
He's really throwing down the gauntlet here.
Hmm.
He talks about this idea of the TV industrial complex and how that whole system, it just doesn't cut it anymore in today's world.
Yeah, it's like trying to get someone's attention by just shouting louder than everyone else in a room that's already crowded. You might turn a few heads,
Right.
but are you really connecting with anybody?
Right, exactly. You're not having a conversation.
Exactly.
You're just making noise.
Yeah, in this book, it's not just about what doesn't work, right?
You know,
Yeah.
it gives you this brilliant alternative, the Purple Cow.
Yeah.
It's about creating something so remarkable
Yes.
that people can't help but talk about it.
Okay, so let's break that down. So,
Okay.
okay, imagine you're driving down a country road, right?
Yeah.
You see a field and it's full of brown cows.
Right.
Nothing special.
Yep.
You've seen that a million times before.
Right.
But then you spot a purple cow.
Oh, yeah.
Now are you going to stop or are you going to take a picture?
You're stopping for that. Definitely.
Yeah, you're going to tell your friends.
Instagrammable.
That's it. You're going to tell your friends. It's memorable.
It's different.
It's different, and that's the reaction that Godin wants businesses to get
Yeah.
from their customers, right?
Right.
He uses examples like Starbucks,
Mm-hmm.
right, which created this whole coffee culture, or JetBlue,
Right.
which took, budget airlines. Nobody wants to fly a budget airline, right?
No.
But they made it like a thing.
An experience.
An experience, yeah. So how does that translate, though, to...
Someone who's not selling, coffee or plane tickets.
Right.
What does a Purple Cow look like for like other industries?
Well, that's where things get really interesting. Godin brings in this idea of sneezers. These are the people who are so enthusiastic about a product or an idea that they just have to tell everyone they know.
So they're like what we call today influencers.
Yeah, yeah. Back then it was word of mouth. Now it's all over social media, right?
Yeah.
But reaching those sneezers,
Right.
that's way more valuable than just blasting your message out to everybody.
Okay.
It's about finding those key people who can get that wildfire of word of mouth marketing going for you.
And he also talks about this concept of otaku.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's like this passionate enthusiasm that people have for their interests.
Mm.
So think about the people who, are lining up for hours to get the latest iPhone
Yes.
or spend all weekend at Comic-Con.
Huge.
If you can tap into that pre-existing passion,
Right.
that is just marketing gold.
Pure gold. Because they are already primed to seek out information
Right.
and share information about the stuff they love.
But isn't there a risk, though, of being too niche? Like, what if your otaku is like a group of 5 people
Right.
who like collect vintage thimbles?
That's where Godin's concept of niches comes in. He actually argues that focusing on a specific niche is actually a really effective way
Oh, yeah.
to launch a purple cow.
So he gives the example of the Phoenix Hotel.
Right.
But instead of just telling me about that, can you give me an example of like how I could apply this to maybe starting an online business?
Sure. So think about how that Phoenix Hotel targeted rock and roll fans in San Francisco, right? You don't sell hotel rooms, but what's your Phoenix Hotel?
Right.
What's that hyper-specific audience you could serve really, really well?
So it's about finding that sweet spot where passion and profitability meet, right?
It's Zach.
Not just chasing the biggest audience, but finding the right audience.
Exactly. And by kind of dominating that niche, you can create something remarkable that really stands out and generates buzz.
Right.
You build this dedicated fan base that then spreads the word organically.
Makes a lot more sense than trying to be everything to everyone right out of the gate.
Absolutely.
But then what happens when that initial buzz starts to fade? How do you keep people talking about your Purple Cow?
That's where Godin's emphasis on risk-taking and innovation comes in. He says companies make this mistake of playing it safe, creating these bland, unremarkable products just because they're afraid to fail.
Right. But isn't that the goal of most businesses?
Yeah.
To minimize risk.
Yeah, but Godin has this fascinating paradox that he brings up.
Oh, yeah.
Trying to avoid criticism by playing it safe often leads to failure because your product just gets lost in the sea of sameness.
So it's almost like being too cautious can be the riskiest move.
It can be.
Okay.
He uses these examples like boring cars,
Right.
boring websites. They just blend into the background. No one's talking about them because there's nothing remarkable to talk about.
It's like that saying, the only thing worse than being talked about is not being talked about.
Exactly. And to avoid that, you have to be willing to take risks, push boundaries,
Right.
create something that truly stands out.
But how do you balance that need for risk-taking with, the very real fear of failure
Right.
that a lot of businesses face,
Right.
especially when you're just starting out?
Well, Godin argues that part of the solution is shifting how we think about design.
Okay.
In a purple cow world, design becomes this integral part of marketing.
It's not just an afterthought.
Not an afterthought. It's about baking that remarkability into the product itself.
So it's not just about like slapping a fancy logo on something.
Right.
It's about making the product itself remarkable.
Exactly. He tells a story about Nissan's Jerry Hirschberg, this designer who fought for a seat at the product development table.
Wow.
He understood that design was essential to creating a remarkable product, and he wasn't afraid to push for that vision.
That's powerful. But, not everyone has the clout of a top car designer.
Right.
What about those of us working at smaller companies? Or even just on our own?
Well, that's where Godin's emphasis on finding your niche and understanding your sneezers really comes back into play.
Okay, so even if you don't have this huge budget or a massive team, you can still create a purple cow
Yes.
by focusing on that specific audience and tailoring your product or service to their needs and passions.
Exactly. And by understanding what makes them tick,
Right.
you can create something that they will love and that they will share with others.
I see. Okay, so we've covered a lot here, but I think we've really just scratched the surface
Yeah.
of what Godin has to offer in Purple Cow. So we're going to continue this deep dive in our next episode.
Looking forward to it. So, when we talk about creating a purple cow, I think it's important to address a common misconception.
Okay.
Some people, when they hear remarkable, they immediately think like flashy or gimmicky.
You're right. Like you need to pull some crazy stunt
Right.
to get noticed.
Yeah, which can backfire.
Totally.
Exactly. Godin isn't saying be outrageous just for the sake of it. It's
Yeah.
not about shock value. It's about creating genuine value and being different in a way that really connects with your audience.
He does talk about this interesting idea of the parody paradox, though.
Oh, yeah, that's a fascinating one.
Yeah.
Think about brands like J. Peterman,
Okay.
whose, quirky catalog was parodied on Seinfeld.
Oh, yeah.
Or even Martha Stewart with her, over-the-top lifestyle.
Aspirational, yeah.
Aspirational, yeah. But those brands, they were definitely unique,
Yeah.
sometimes to the point of being absurd,
Mhm.
but they were also incredibly successful.
They were huge.
And that's the paradox. That very uniqueness, even when it was kind of absurd,
Right.
made them ripe for parody. And that parody actually amplified their reach.
So you're saying being laughed at can be a good thing?
In a way, yes. It means you've created something distinctive enough to be memorable and talked about. Even if it's at your expense, it gets people talking.
Okay, that's interesting. He also uses the example of Pearl Jam, who, instead of chasing mainstream radio play,
Right.
they released a ton of live albums just directly to their fans.
Directly to the fans. They understood the power of building that loyal following
Right.
and giving them what they craved, even if it went against the industry norms.
So it's like they created their own Purple Cow ecosystem
Yeah.
outside of the traditional music industry.
Exactly. It highlights Godin's point that not every customer is created equal.
Okay.
Some are worth more than others, especially when it comes to spreading the word.
But isn't the goal of most marketing campaigns to reach as many people as possible?
Yeah, that's the traditional way of thinking about it. But Godin challenges that with this thing he calls the law of large numbers.
Okay.
He argues that reaching a huge audience, it doesn't guarantee success.
I'm thinking of those banner ads you see online.
Right.
They might get millions of impressions, but how many people are actually clicking on them?
Exactly. It's a trap to think you need to reach everyone. Godin argues it's much more effective to focus on reaching the right people
Okay.
at the right time with the right message.
So instead of casting a wide net and hoping to catch a few fish, you're using a spear and going after specific fish you want.
Perfect analogy. Godin uses the example of the Otis Elevator Company.
Okay.
They didn't try to just make a better elevator. They focused on solving a specific problem, slow elevators in tall buildings.
And they came up with that brilliant system that pre-sorts passengers by destination.
Yeah.
Every elevator becomes an express.
Game changer, right.
Right.
And all of a sudden, Otis is on every building developer's radar, not because of flashy ads, but because they solved a real, tangible problem
Yeah.
in an innovative way. That's a purple cow in action.
It's about understanding your customers' pain points
Yes,
and offering solutions that are both effective and remarkable.
absolutely. But creating a purple cow is only half the battle.
Right.
You need to measure its effectiveness.
Godin talks about moving away from that spray and pray approach of traditional advertising.
Yeah.
Where you just put a bunch of stuff out there and
Right.
hope something sticks.
It's about tracking what's working, what's not working, and being willing to adapt your approach based on the data.
He uses the example of Zara,
Mm.
the fast fashion retailer. They're always tweaking, always refining based on customer data.
Real-time data, yeah. It's like they're treating their business like a constant experiment. They're not afraid to try new things.
But how can someone running a smaller business, maybe a solopreneur even, apply that same level of data-driven decision-making?
It might not be as sophisticated as Zara's system,
Right.
but the principles are the same. Pay attention to how your customers are responding.
Right.
What are they saying? What are they not saying?
Right.
Use that feedback to make adjustments.
So it's about being a good listener, being
Yeah.
willing to pivot if something's not working.
Yes. And don't be afraid to experiment with different approaches. Godin even suggests this idea of bronifying your products.
Bronifying. Okay, you're going to have to explain that one.
Think Dr. Bronner's soap.
Oh, yeah.
With all the crazy philosophical text crammed onto the label,
Yeah, it's a cult classic.
it's totally unconventional,
Yeah.
even a little off-putting to some people, but it's memorable.
Yeah.
And it works. Godin suggests companies try to emulate that spirit of bold differentiation,
Right.
even if it means breaking some of the norms in your industry.
So find that unique element
Yeah,
that makes your product stand out, even if it's a little quirky.
exactly. But here's the key. That quirkiness,
Yeah.
that difference, it has to be rooted in something authentic and meaningful.
Right.
It can't just be for shock value.
It has to be real.
It has to reflect your brand and what you offer.
So it's not just being different to be different. It's being different in a way that aligns with your values.
Exactly.
Okay.
And remember, being remarkable doesn't have to be expensive or complicated.
Right.
Godin talks about simple ways to stand out, like having really friendly customer service.
Or just doing something unexpected for your customers.
Yeah. He shares a great story about this Haagen-Dazs shop that offered free coffee and biscotti to people waiting in line.
Nice.
It was a small gesture,
Yeah.
but it created this buzz and made people feel good about the brand.
It's those small personal touches. Right.
It is.
Sometimes they're more powerful than any ad.
Absolutely. But probably the most important thing when it comes to creating a purple cow is challenging the status quo.
Okay.
Godin encourages companies to ask, why not? Instead of just accepting things the way they are.
He says to identify the things that are just not done in your industry.
Yeah.
And then do them.
And then do them.
Yeah.
He gives the example of JetBlue having a dress code for passengers.
Wow.
And the best dressed would win a free ticket.
That's wild. It's about shaking things up.
It is.
Breaking those predictable patterns. But wouldn't that alienate some customers?
Maybe, but remember, you're not trying to please everyone.
Right.
You're trying to reach those sneezers, the people who will get your vision.
So it's like you're creating a club
Yeah,
and not everyone's invited.
right.
And that makes it even more desirable.
Exactly. It's about being yourself and attracting the people who really resonate with what you're doing. But to do that effectively, you need a clear message.
He talks about slogans. right?
Slogans, having a strong slogan that captures the essence of your purple cow
Something your sneezers can use.
that they can use. Think about just do it or think different.
Those are great slogans.
They're more than just taglines. They're rallying cries that encapsulate what the brand stands for.
They're powerful.
They are, and they're easily shareable.
But coming up with a slogan like that can feel daunting,
Yeah.
especially for a new business.
It doesn't have to be perfect from day one. The important thing is to capture the spirit of your brand,
Okay.
something that resonates with your target audience.
So experimentation and iteration again.
Exactly. And remember, creating a purple cow, this isn't a one-time thing.
Right.
It's a process. You always need to be innovating and evolving.
Even the most remarkable product can become commonplace, right?
It can. Godin calls this the magic cycle of the cow.
Okay.
It's got 4 steps.
Okay, let's hear them.
First, you build what he calls a permission asset. That's a group of loyal customers who trust you,
Okay.
and they want to hear from you.
Those sneezers again.
Sneezers, yes. Second, you work with those sneezers to get the word out.
Word of mouth marketing.
Yeah. Third,
Oh,
once you've got some success, you milk it.
maximize profits.
Maximize profits, yeah. And finally, you reinvest those profits into creating the next Purple Cow.
So it's a continuous cycle.
Continuous cycle of innovation and reinvention.
So it's not about creating one purple cow and then being done.
Yep.
It's about constantly striving to be remarkable.
That's what Godey's advocating for.
Yeah.
Think small, focus on those niches
Right.
where you can really dominate.
Because when there's infinite choice,
Yeah,
the only way to stand out.
is to be exceptional. As we're wrapping up, exploring this whole idea of the Purple Cow, one thing that really stuck with me is Godin's emphasis on storytelling.
Yeah.
It's not just enough to make something remarkable.
Right.
You got to be able to tell a compelling story about it.
It's like you're giving it a voice.
Exactly. And that voice, it's got to be clear, concise, captivating.
Right. He talks about how, like, a good slogan, it could act as a script almost
Yes.
for your sneezers.
Yeah, it gives them that language, that framework to talk about your product
Yeah.
and communicate why it's so valuable.
It's like you're handing them a megaphone and saying, go tell the world.
Exactly.
What about, he uses the example of Tiffany's blue box.
Oh, perfect example.
It's not just packaging, right?
No.
It's this symbol of luxury exclusivity.
It tells a story without even needing words.
And then that story is carried forward by everyone who gets a gift in that box.
You're right.
It's like this built-in marketing.
It is. It makes me think of those unboxing videos online.
Yeah, those are huge.
People love to share that excitement, the anticipation.
And a well-crafted story, it can tap into that same feeling.
Exactly.
Godin also shares this really interesting example of a small business owner
Okay.
who actually put his home phone number
Wow.
on his business cards,
Bold move.
inviting people to call him directly with any feedback.
So he's not afraid of getting overwhelmed with calls.
Yeah, I know, right? But I mean, it shows a level of commitment,
Yeah.
transparency that you just don't see that often.
And I bet it leads to some great stories.
Yeah, you're going to remember that phone call,
You are.
and you're going to tell your friends about it.
For sure. It's a good reminder that remarkability, it doesn't always have to be this big, grand gesture.
Right.
Sometimes it's the small, personal things that make the biggest impact.
It's about making a connection.
Exactly.
And stories, I mean, they're powerful for that.
Absolutely.
Godin also talks about how companies can kind of leverage that power of otaku
Mm-hmm.
by going after markets where that passionate enthusiasm already exists.
Yeah, he uses the example of hot sauce.
Okay, spicy
There's a whole subculture of people.
chili heads.
Chili heads, yes.
Yeah.
Obsessed with finding the hottest, the most flavorful sauces.
They're like the ultimate sneezers.
They are. They're already out there seeking and sharing information about their passion.
So you got to find those pockets of otaku, right?
You do.
And tailor what you're doing to them.
Absolutely. He gives so many examples of companies doing that successfully.
Yeah.
From high-end audio equipment to custom motorcycles to like handcrafted salt.
Wow, so there's a market for almost anything,
There really is.
no matter how niche it seems.
If you can find those passionate people, you've found your Purple Cow audience.
So I guess as we wrap up our deep dive into Purple Cow, what's that one key takeaway you want listeners to walk away with?
It's this. In a world with so many choices, the only way to stand out is to be truly remarkable.
And that doesn't just happen.
No, it takes work.
It takes intention, it takes creativity, and it takes challenging how things are normally done.
It's about creating things that are worth talking about.
Products, services, experiences.
And then giving your sneezers the tools and the stories to spread the word.
So what's one small but remarkable change you can make today in your work, your business?
That's something to think about.
That's the question we'll leave you with. Go out there and find your Purple Cow.